Hi guys, and welcome back to the Early Bird Photo News. We usually discuss camera equipment here, but what's also important when it comes to digital cameras is having fast computers that help you in the editing process. And last week Apple released a few new very interesting computers, the Mac Studio line, which is basically a Mac Mini on steroids, a bigger case but with a lot more power and fantastic chips inside. So there's the M1 Max version that comes in at around $2,000, has fantastic performance, and I think $2,000 seems like a pretty fair price. And then there's the M1 Ultra version that has a new mega fast chip, which fantastic graphic processing as well, that can even outperform a few Mac Pros. M1 Ultra version starts at $4,000, so I think once you spec that one out, it will come in at $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, so pretty pricey, but I think performance-wise it will be very amazing. I must say that after not having any Apple gear for a while, I this year bought actually two laptops. This M1 MacBook Pro that I really enjoy, and an M1 Max 16-inch that I use for video editing and photo editing on the road. Of all the computers I currently have, this 13-inch MacBook Pro is actually my preferred laptop, simply because it's powerful enough to do most tasks and it's small enough to have it wherever I go. It's a little bit too small in terms of the screen size when it comes to hardcore editing, but all in all I think that's a fantastic computer. Apple also released a nice looking 27-inch Mac Studio display that comes in from a range around $1,500 to $2,000. So let me know in the comments, are you a Windows guy and none of this interested you at all? Or are you an Apple guy and you might be tempted by one of those new Mac Studio computers? Or are you a laptop guy and you say, laptop is all I need? Let me know. Interestingly, this week there's also been a few documents floating around that showed that Canon registered 6 new digital cameras and Nikon registered 2 new digital cameras. On top of that, Canon also registered 2 new RF lenses. Generally, when these cameras and products are registered, it means that anywhere from a few weeks to a few months, we will likely be seeing some new announcements. I'm still confident that we will be hearing about at least one new Canon camera body very soon. And I know a lot of you guys are still hoping that it will be the R7 APS-C sensor with a 1.6 crop factor, around the 30 megapixel mark, and eye tracking. I also think that would be a fantastic camera, would make a lot of sense in the Canon lineup. What the other cameras might be, we don't know yet. I don't think it's going to be the R1 just yet. Maybe we hear about a development announcement at some point, but I think there will be a few other cameras ahead of an R1 announcement, which we might hear more towards the end of the year. One other camera I think is very likely to be announced at some stage is a high megapixel camera that's built on the like R5 kind of body in the 75 to 100 megapixel range, something Sony and Nikon also seem to be working on. Last week I also said that I think in order for Canon to become the #1 in mirrorless sales, they need a lot more cheaper entry-level full-frame mirrorless cameras. So I think it would make a lot of sense to see a sub $1,000 entry-level full-frame camera that is like an RP but with better spec, and then see 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 cameras kind of sitting somewhere between that RP and the Canon EOS R6. The only question for all of us will always be, where's that Canon triple hammer gonna hit all of these cameras? I would assume that some of these won't have the eye tracking. For instance, the EOS RP successor might not even have a viewfinder, an EVF. We don't know at this stage, but I think there will be a lot of very interesting cameras coming out this year, and Canon really seems to be determined to push sales, create new cameras. What cameras would you like to see from Canon other than an R1 and an R7? And what specs would you actually like to see in an R1? Let me know in the comments. On top of these 6 cameras, Canon also registered 2 new RF lenses. It's anyone's guess at this stage what these might be, but I think if they were released at R7 for instance, it would make a lot of sense to release a lens that a lot of people would use with a body like this. Maybe something like a 150 to 600 millimeter lens, which I unfortunately think is unlikely because there's so much overlap with the 100 to 500, but that would be a fantastic lens coupled with an R7 for wildlife photography, wouldn't it? And if you're a wildlife and bird photographer who loves to take images of birds but is not quite sure how to get the absolute most out of the raw files and create stunning looking final images, make sure to check out my masterclass and PROSETS in the description where I teach you exactly how to transform your images into masterpieces. It was also very interesting to see people speculating what 2 new Nikon cameras might be coming out, and One camera that gets mentioned a lot is like a Z8. Something like the Z9 but in a smaller body. While that would be really nice, I just don't see a camera like that happening. I think Nikon made that mistake back in the day with the D3 and the D700, although obviously that would be a fantastic camera for many people. What I think would make a lot of sense for Nikon to do very soon would be a Z7 III, something that can rival the Canon R5. I think the expectations are now that any new camera Nikon will deliver has much better autofocus. So I'm really thinking this is a new era starting, and so it would make a lot of sense for Nikon to release some new cameras that can utilize some of the features of the Z9. Not all of the features, but at least some of the better autofocus and maybe some higher speed. The most difficulty I see with Nikon is actually that the Z9 only shoots in 20 frames per second, because that's something the R5 can do as well. So if you have a Z7 III that should kind of have similar specs to an R5, how do you position it? Would you have a Z7 III that has the same frame rate as the Z9? Maybe what's going to happen is that the Z7 III could potentially have a few more megapixels, for instance, and then being a little bit slower. What would you want to see in a Z7 III? Something I think a lot of people would really like to see is a D500 replacement. Maybe let's call it a Z500 with a APC crop sensor, good performance, good specs, great autofocus, and at a decent price point. And that coupled with the soon to be announced Nikon 200 to 600 would be a fantastic entry combo for many people into wildlife photography. What's very frustrating for a lot of us at the moment is having to wait for gear that is back ordered, and sometimes that can take months, 6 months, up to a year. I know a lot of people just go to one of those big stores that has hundreds of thousands of customers and order their new camera there, which is great in theory because it's a great reputable store. You might get a better price. However, there's thousands of other people that think the same way. So a shop like B&H Photo in New York might get 5,000 pre-orders for Z9 cameras. And while these big shops get shipped hundreds of new cameras, they won't get all the new cameras shipped because camera manufacturers like Canon or Nikon like to keep all their clients, the camera stores, happy. So while a shop like B&H gets a majority of the cameras, they don't get all cameras, and Nikon will drip feed small amounts of Z9 also to smaller retailers. For instance, a friend of mine ordered his Z9 on the day that it was announced, and he got it on the day that it was shipped from a very small store. And in fact, that store only had 3 people pre-ordering. They got 2 Z9s on the day that it was shipped, and the third one has been fulfilled by now as well. So this small store was actually able to fulfill all Z9 pre-orders in a pretty short amount of time. And another friend of mine was looking for a Z9 only 6 weeks ago. All the big stores said there's no chance to get one, it might be the end of the year, but he kept phoning around, found a smaller store that had someone who cancelled a pre-order. He could take over the pre-order, got the Z9 2 weeks ago and had only to wait 4 weeks, and he only ordered just very recently. Phoning around, looking at these smaller stores, talking to them is a fantastic way of actually securing back order products much faster. And you will be surprised if you just call a few different smaller retailers how they will be very happy to work with you. Another thing that you can do long term is, for instance, build a true relationship with a camera store. I like to buy all my gear from the same store so they know me, they value my business, and in return I might be able to say, can you secure me one of those camera bodies? They value me and I value what they can do for me. If you're waiting months and months for back order gear, I think it might be worthwhile to pick up the phone, call up a few smaller shops and see if one of them might be able to help you out getting your gear much faster. So that wraps up the early bird photo news. Make sure to subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with all my videos. Give me a thumbs up for the video, that really helps me with the algorithm. And let me know in the comments your thoughts about the rumors and gear that we've discussed in this episode. And I will see you in the next video very soon. Bye guys.